Hello, and welcome to Where Do We Start, a podcast where we explore the stars, the self, and everything in between. I'm your host, Amber Mitchell, and today we have a bit of an astrology deep dive because one of the most common questions that I get, one of the things that I think people are most interested in when it comes to astrology is compatibility. People often want to know what signs they're most compatible with or incompatible with, or why they tend to always attract a certain zodiac sign. And there's really a lot to be said about this topic. There's a lot of myths and misconceptions. So I want to clear up some of those and just really dive deep into this subject because I really do think that it's one of the best tools that you can use to understand the people around you in your friendships and your romantic relationships. So, number one, right off the gate, it just has to be said that astrology does not determine whether or not a relationship will or will not work. It describes the experience, the possible experience that you will have in that relationship, and that can really vary depending on the aspects and the other circumstances that are, more external. But whether or not the relationship works is really up to you. And in fact, I wouldn't even really trust someone saying that a relationship simply will not work based on the synastry or the compatibility between you two. And this really comes down to understanding that there's no such thing as good or bad placements. Some placements can be more challenging than others, and even that in itself is subjective. So it is not the end all be all of whether or not something will work. It just describes the experience. And the second thing that I think is the most common misconception is that your sun sign compatibility is not king. So your sun sign is most likely the sign that you know. If someone asks you what your zodiac sign is, that's the one you respond with. But your moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars compatibility actually has way more of an impact on your relationships. And this is because your moon sign represents your emotional nature, and your Venus is how you relate and the things that you're attracted to. Mercury is how you communicate, and Mars is how you handle challenges and your sex drive. So your relationships with other people really are based on a combination of all of those things, not just your sun sign. But astrology can explain why you attract other certain signs more often than not. And this is because if you are attracted to female partners, then you typically are attracted to your moon and your Venus signs. And if you're attracted to male partners, then that's usually going to be your Jupiter and your Mars sign. And this is because the moon represents more of the wife nurturing type of character, and Venus is more of the attractive feminine, and Jupiter oppositely is the husband figure, whereas Mars is more of the attractive male figure. So we do tend to be attracted to people who have those signs as their sun or moon or rising signs, as well as the sign on your fifth house. This is kind of one of the most interesting things that I often see in charts is that the fifth house does represent dating and creativity, and a lot of times people do date people who have their same sign as the sign on their fifth house, or planets in their fifth house. Now, the fourth and probably most interesting thing is that astrology can tell you about the common vibes and themes that you will experience in your relationships. And I essentially like to refer to this as your relationship dynamics. And this is based on your ascendant and your descendant. So basically, if you know your rising sign, you would take your rising sign and the sign opposite that. And so I'll go through them really quickly because there's only 6. And so this kind of will explain what the common relationship dynamics are. So if you have Aries and Libra on your ascendant and descendant, this is like your typical relationship where one person is kind of like the leader and the other one is the follower, or one is the more assertive, aggressive one, and the other is more amicable and peaceful. If you have Taurus and Scorpio on your ascendant and descendant, then this describes a relationship dynamic where one person is like the more calm person and the other is more chaos. So one person usually likes to stick to things being the same and likes to know what to expect, while the other person likes for things to be constantly changing. If you have Gemini and Sagittarius on your ascendant and descendant, this describes a relationship dynamic where one person is like the student and the other is the teacher, or often I find that one person is very rational and logical while the other person is more philosophical and more into like their beliefs and spirituality. If you have Cancer and Capricorn on your ascendant and descendant, this is often the relationship dynamic where one person tends to be more bossy or dominant and the other person tends to be more submissive, as well as one person tends to be more emotionally nurturing while the other can be more stoic and focused on like the material things. And then if you have Leo and Aquarius on your ascendant and descendant, this is one of my favorite relationship dynamics because it tends to be one where one person is like the artist and the other is their muse. And another way that this often shows up is where one person is very traditional and by the book and the other person is kind of eccentric and quirky or rebellious. And lastly, if you have Virgo and Pisces on your ascendant and descendant, then this is the relationship dynamic where one person tends to be very rational and practical and organized and has everything all planned out, while the other person is just very free-spirited and kind of go with the flow, very much like the Gemini and Sagittarius type of relationship. So yeah, those are basically the 6 common relationship dynamics that you'll see depending on your rising sign and your descendant sign. And these are relationship dynamics that you'll see in all of your one-on-one relationships. So not just your romantic ones, but any ones that become very important, like your business relationships or very close friends. And the last thing that I want to mention is maybe a bit controversial, but I do think that there are relationship red flags that you might see in charts. Now, I want to say that this is not just someone having a certain sun sign. So while I would love to say that Virgo men are the devil, it'd be really unfair of me to say that that is a red flag just based on my personal experience. So what I'm referring to more so here are aspects that hold a certain meaning. So like Venus-Saturn squares tend to indicate issues with commitment, or Mercury-Mars squares tend to indicate combativeness and argumentative behaviors. So those are more of the things that I'm referring to when I say red flags, and not just in that person's natal chart, but in the chart that you have together, which is considered to be a compatibility or synastry chart. But like I said, there's so much that goes into your relationship compatibility with other people. So even just those aspects are not something that you should base a relationship on, or base, whether or not you want to be with someone. Because in my experience, having read at this point probably hundreds of charts, one thing is true, that none of them are the same. I've never come across any 2 charts that were exactly the same. So don't create these like preconceived notions of people, especially not just based on their sun signs. Now knowing that there's so much more that kind of goes into that. We are much more complex individuals than just a set of 12 simple archetypes. So there's a lot more that goes into that, and you shouldn't make a judgment based off of those things alone. It really depends on the entire relationship chemistry and where you're at in life and what you're willing to work through. Like I said, I do think that astrology can be one of the best tools for understanding yourself and the people around you if you know how to use it right. So I really hope that this sort of astrology deep dive style episode was at least informational and helpful to you. If you liked it, then definitely be sure to like this, review, and subscribe. And if you want more content like this, kind of more in-depth personalized content like this, I have a wealth of it over on my Patreon, so you can definitely join us over there, become a member of the Cosmic Cousins tribe. It's a really great place to be. And I do also post daily updates on my Instagram, and that's a great place if you have any questions about any of these things. I do read my comments, I do respond to messages, so you can ask me questions over there. And until next time, take care and keep on shining.